A single raindrop begins as an invisible cluster of just 6 water molecules, and the pressure holding those molecules together would crush a human body into something unrecognizable before the drop even reaches the size of a grain of sand. That is not a metaphor. That is a measured, documented physical reality. And the fact that this happens billions of times per second above your head right now should make you question everything you think you know about something as ordinary as rain. Here is why this matters beyond just being weird. We tend to think of water forming in the sky as passive. Vapor rises, it condenses, it falls. Simple. But atmospheric nucleation is one of the most violent molecular processes on Earth, happening at a scale so small and so fast that the forces involved make industrial crushers look gentle. Understanding this changes how we see climate, weather, and the very boundary between chemistry and physics. So let's go somewhere no human has ever gone. Shrink down to the nanoscale and survive inside a raindrop as it forms. You are now roughly 2 nanometers tall, floating inside the atmosphere at about 2 kilometers above the ground. The temperature is -12 degrees Celsius. Around you, individual water molecules are moving at roughly 600 meters per second. That is faster than a rifle bullet. Every collision with one of those molecules carries enough kinetic energy to send something your size tumbling for what would feel like kilometers at your scale. But something is happening nearby. A tiny aerosol particle, maybe a fragment of sea salt or a speck of mineral dust, is drifting through this chaos. It carries a slight electrical charge. And that charge is about to start one of the most dramatic processes in atmospheric science. Water molecules begin clustering around this particle. Not gently, not slowly. The first 6 molecules lock together in what scientists call an embryonic cluster, and the binding energy released in that moment is equivalent, at your scale, to an explosion. The surface tension forming between those molecules generates internal pressures of over 1,000 atmospheres. That is more pressure than exists at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Think about what 1,000 atmospheres means. It means every square centimeter of surface is being pushed on by a weight of roughly 1,000 kilograms. If you were inside that embryonic cluster, every cell in your body would rupture simultaneously. Your bones would not just break. They would liquefy. You would not feel pain because there would be no you left to feel it within the first microsecond. And this happens in a structure smaller than a single virus. Now here is where it gets even stranger. That embryonic cluster might not survive. This is the part thermodynamics textbooks gloss over because it sounds almost philosophical. The cluster exists in a state called the critical nucleus phase. Below a certain size, the energy cost of creating new surface area is actually higher than the energy gained by bonding. So the cluster can spontaneously dissolve. It is alive and it is dying at the same time, flickering between existence and non-existence. If this blew your mind, subscribe right now. We cover the science that textbooks skip, explained the way it deserves to be. Once the cluster crosses the critical size threshold, which is typically between 30 and 300 molecules depending on temperature and humidity, something irreversible happens. The energy balance tips. Surface tension stops fighting the growth and starts enabling it. Water molecules begin slamming into the cluster at a rate of hundreds of millions per second. The drop grows. But you are still inside, and the situation is not getting safer. As the drop expands from nanometers to micrometers, the internal pressure actually changes in a counterintuitive way. It drops rapidly, and that pressure drop causes something extraordinary. The water inside the forming droplet undergoes what is called spinodal decomposition at its surface boundary. Meaning the transition between liquid water and vapor is not a clean line. It is a violent, churning zone where matter cannot decide what phase it wants to be. At your scale, this boundary region would look like a wall of fire and ice simultaneously, with molecular bonds forming and shattering millions of times per second. You would be torn apart not by crushing but by phase instability. Half of you might briefly be inside liquid water while the other half is in vapor. Your molecules would be recruited into the drop itself. You would literally become part of the raindrop. And now consider this final layer. That raindrop you have become part of is not falling clean. As it descends through the atmosphere over the next 20 minutes, it collects other nuclei, other aerosols, bacteria, viruses, fungal spores, and dissolved gases. By the time it hits the ground, a single raindrop contains a microscopic ecosystem assembled in real time by atmospheric physics. Raindrops are not just water. They are mobile biological archives built by molecular violence. This has real implications. Scientists studying cloud seeding and geoengineering need to understand nucleation precisely because manipulating it means manipulating rainfall itself. Get the nucleation chemistry wrong and you don't just miss the rain. You change regional climates. Some researchers now believe that specific types of biological aerosols, including bacteria exhaled by forests, actively tune their own rainfall by influencing nucleation thresholds. Trees may be engineering their own weather. The universe keeps revealing that the processes we call simple are just the ones we haven't looked at closely enough yet. Rain is not simple. It is a cascade of molecular catastrophes that somehow produces something gentle enough to grow a flower. Every storm above you right now is running billions of these violent nanoscale explosions per second. And every one of them is following rules so precise that physicists can write equations predicting exactly when a 6-molecule cluster decides to become a raindrop. If you want more science that breaks your assumptions and then rebuilds your understanding of reality, subscribe and hit the bell. Next time we go somewhere even stranger.